Chicken on a stick.
Hi, I'm Patrick.
I'm Maggie.
And we are Chicken on a Stick. Welcome back to another episode.
Welcome.
Today we're going to be talking about, and actually this is a pretty convenient time that we decided to watch this. And it was definitely, it wasn't a happy accident. It was completely on purpose because we very much don't think that far ahead in what movies we're going to do. But
not at all.
We're recording this the week of the last voyage of the Demeter coming out, and it just felt right, since that's a Dracula story, to revisit another Dracula story, and not just any Dracula story, but one that is cited as one of the more accurate to the original story, which is 1992's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
And I would like the record to show that this was my idea.
No, it wasn't. This is my movie.
Was it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, of course I'm right. Anyway, so we will jump into this movie momentarily.
We need your strength for the dark days ahead. Mina?
Doctor,
Yeah?
how did Lucy die?
Huh?
Was she in great pain?
Yeah, she was in great pain. Then we cut off her head and drove a stake through her heart and burned it, and then she found peace.
Doctor! Please.
So, Mr. Harker, I must now ask you, as your doctor, a sensitive question. During your infidelity with those creatures, those demonic women, did you for one instant taste of their blood?
No.
No?
No.
Good. Then you have not infected your blood with the terrible disease that destroyed poor Lucy.
Doctor, you must understand. I doubted everything. Even my mind. I was impotent with fear.
I know.
But, sir, I know where the bastard sleeps. I brought him there. To Carfax Abbey.
Vampires do exist. And this one we fight, this one we face, has the strength of 20 or more people. And you can testify for that, Mr. Harker. But he can also control the meaner things of life. The bat, the rodent, the wolf. He can appear as mist, as vapor, as fog, and vanish at will. Now, all these things Dracula can do, but he is not free. He must rest in the sacred earth of his homeland to gain his evil power.
So Bram Stoker's Dracula. This is the first time I've ever seen this.
And I think mine too. I'm pretty sure. If I had seen it a long time ago, I forgot all about it.
My knowledge of Dracula is quite cursory. Is that the word? Where it's like not directly knowledgeable, but just sort of absorbed information from many different sources of media, video games, TV shows, all sorts of things, but never until, I don't know if it's quite this year, but within the last 2 years, have I watched any original sort of Dracula movie.
I think, what was it that I kept getting it confused with?
Well,
The one with Johnny Depp and Tom Cruise?
Oh, Interview with the Vampire.
I get those two confused a lot.
And is Johnny Depp in that one? Isn't that Brad Pitt?
Maybe it is.
It's Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise.
Brad Pitt, yeah, and Tom Cruise.
Yeah, that's a different thing altogether, I think. So this movie, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, very famous name.
Very famous.
Only has won Academy Awards and things like that.
He also makes wine.
Does he make wine?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. I don't think that I knew that.
It's a little expensive.
Obviously, probably most famously known for doing The Godfather.
Mm-hmm.
This movie stars quite a few big names, especially for like the early 90s. We have Gary Oldman as Count Dracula himself, Winona Ryder as Mina Harker, Anthony Hopkins as Professor Abraham Van Helsing, and Keanu Reeves as Jonathan Harker. Those are sort of our central staples. While there are some other characters who do play a pretty big role, such as Richard E. Grant as Dr. Jack Seward, Cary Elwes as Lord Arthur Holmwood, which you may not... I did not realize until just now that was Cary Elwes. I think
I did.
Billy Campbell as Quincy P. Morris, and Sadie Frost as Lucy Westerna? Westernra? I don't know how you pronounce that last name.
No idea.
And Tom Waits as R.M. Renfield.
Good cast.
Very good cast top to bottom. The only one that, and I have heard this in the past, so I kind of realized it going forward, and now watching the movie I understand, is I don't know what accent Keanu Reeves is trying to do in this movie, but it is not great.
No, it's not great, but it is really fun to see him like so young and, I don't know, young and dapper. Nice to see a little fresh young Keanu.
Yeah. So a little bit before we actually get into the movie itself, just kind of general information about Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is the original book that this film's based on, is a novel by who other but Bram Stoker. That's why it's got his name in it. Was published in 1897. It is an epistolary novel, which means that the narration for the whole thing is relayed through letters, diary entries, and newspapers, and not from like a certain character's point of view. So while you're reading it, you're reading like somebody like Jonathan Harker's journal, or letters he's writing to Mina, or Mina's writing letters to him, or she's noting what journeys they're sort of going on. Or in the case of the part of the Demeter in the book, it is the captain's logs. So like the date is whatever, something weird's going on this ship.
I love that technique. I love that idea. I feel like I've read a couple books in the past that were kind of along that same line, where you're just reading correspondence. And I think that's so creative. I love that.
Yeah, so I'm not going to dive super far into it, but I did do a little bit of like research or kind of watching some videos about Bram Stoker himself, because I'm not very familiar. I've said it many times. I don't know how to read, so when it comes to books, totally out of my ballpark.
You very much so know how to read.
But what I learned is that Bram Stoker, many sort of historians and people who've kind of studied his life and things, since he's long past, believe that he was a closeted gay man who was married and had children, but the marriage was reportedly there was no love, like a loveless marriage is how you would say it.
Right.
And that a lot of his sort of personal fears and thoughts about how society at the time viewed his like sexuality is portrayed through the novel he wrote of Dracula, in the sense of there's moments where in this movie and in the book respectively, there's a moment where Jonathan cuts his face shaving, and Dracula is like really drawn into, obviously wanting to suck his blood, but that like drawn in almost erotically to wanting to suck on this other dude's face sort of thing. That that I suppose could be used as sort of a euphemism of
Right.
feeling a certain way towards somebody of the same sex.
Okay.
And then there's bits of Mina and Jonathan's relationship, which, while she's more or less brainwashed or seduced by Dracula, is showing that maybe she's not quite happy in that relationship. And then
Not satisfied.
Lucy is sort of kind of more free-spirited, I guess is the way that you'd say it. She's definitely leading on multiple men at once and stuff. And
Right.
then the actual disease, I guess, of vampirism in this is something that affects your blood directly, which apparently Bram Stoker had a fear of syphilis, because syphilis was a huge thing back then, which similarly to what knowledge they had was something that kind of like attacked your blood cells and whatever, or affected you in some way. So he was living out a lot of his like personal demons and fears and sexuality and stuff through this book. So with the story, you can read into it in so many deeper ways than just like it's a story about a vampire guy.
Yeah. Like it's definitely a lot deeper than, you know, if you like go and pick up a Twilight book.
Definitely. Now, Dracula, the story, went on to definitely become a cultural sort of landmark that still to this day we're seeing things inspired by that story. For example, we really enjoy and watch What We Do in the Shadows.
Obsessed with that show. If you haven't seen it, you have to. It's
Which
so funny.
is based on the movie, which in the movie has a character who looks like Count Orlok from the 1932, I'm probably wrong on the year for that, but really old original Nosferatu, which that Nosferatu was, I think, the first and a completely unofficial making of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is why the characters' names are different, which is why it's not called Dracula, because it was an unofficial adaptation of the book. So they changed a bunch of names and locations and things, but generally the plot is that of Dracula.
Interesting.
So like I said, to today, cross-media all over the place. I mean, What We Do in the Shadows is just one indication. This year we had the movie Renfield came out, which is, of course, based on Dracula. Nicolas Cage played actual Count Dracula. Nicholas Hoult played the titular Renfield in that movie. That movie called back to the 1930s original Dracula with Bela Lugosi in it, which that one I had seen, again, probably last year or maybe even earlier this year is when I watched it the first time.
I've been trying so hard to think of what this movie was called. My brother Mark, he really liked a Dracula movie that came out, I think sometime in between like 2000, 2004, but it was more so like the religious backstory of Dracula, like I don't remember what it was. I remember it was rated R, and I remember that.
Do you remember who was in it?
No. I just remember my parents didn't want him to see it.
Oh, you were young.
Yeah.
Oh, then.
And he saw it. I wish I could remember what it was, but there was some movie that he was obsessed with. But yeah, what We Do in the Shadows, I knew. The other one that
Could it have just been Dracula 2000?
You know, it actually could be.
That was a movie.
It totally could be. That would make sense. I complicate things for zero reason.
I mean, I don't know. I was just trying to look up 2000's Dracula movie.
Yeah.
And that's the very first thing that came up, so who knows?
But yeah, I feel like I've always liked and enjoyed vampire movies with the exception of Twilight. I tried real hard to like it.
Yeah.
Not for me.
So, most of the common sort of mythos of vampires does come from this, such as like staking them in the heart, being, I was going to say allergic, but like garlic really being off-putting to them, To some degree, sunlight bothering them, although that's evolved into like sunlight will kill you, whereas this very clearly says like the sunlight just weakens them, so it doesn't necessarily kill them, it just weakens their power.
And you have to be welcomed into a doorway.
That one's a little confusing, specifically in this movie, because there is a moment in this movie where Jonathan Harker, when he first gets to the Count's castle, is standing in the doorway, and then Dracula welcomes him in, and it's made like a thing of him stepping through the entranceway, but we don't ever see it the other way around, I don't think.
Well, if you watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer growing up like I did, you know that you have to invite a vampire inside. And that's why you're not supposed to have welcome mats that say welcome on them. Ours says hello. You're not getting in here.
Yeah. One final thing before we kind of really jump into it is, contrary to popular belief, to some degree, Dracula, the character, is not directly representative of Vlad the Impaler.
Right.
It is speculated by sort of like professors or scholars or whatever that look into this sort of stuff that Dracula was likely inspired by Vlad the Impaler, or even Countess Elizabeth Bathory. I'm probably mispronounced that. But there's no concrete evidence. Bram Stoker never directly said that that's where his inspiration came from or anything like that. But it's largely been implied through a lot of stuff that is actually the case. Vlad the Impaler would be known as Vlad Dracula, or like Son of the Dragon, I think is what that comes out to mean, or maybe just Dragon itself. He was a ruler or a prince of Wallachia, which is now Romania. That's why if you go to Romania, there's like Dracula's castle, which is Dracula's castle, probably Vlad's, not necessarily Dracula, but I don't know.
On that note, I would also like to state before we get started that I was personally invited to go to Dracula's castle by someone that lived in Romania.
Yeah. Stoker's notes mentioned that he found the name Dracula in Whitby's public library. Whitby is a town in England where some of this story actually takes place. So he was just literally looking up in a library, found that, and picked it because it meant devil in Romanian.
You ready for some Romanian?
Yeah.
Ce faci?
What is that?
What's up?
What's up?
You say, bine.
Bine.
Nothing. Or wait. Or is that how are you and I'm good?
Well,
I'm such a
very
pro.
useful. Thanks for telling us.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you ready to get into it?
I'm ready.
So Bram Stoker's Dracula. We're just going to get into this. I don't know enough, again, about the original story or the movie to really point out all of the sort of differences. Like, this is stuff that Francis Ford Coppola added. Mm-hmm. This stuff is in the book. That stuff's not in the book. That's slightly changed or whatever. I won't be able to tell you all that stuff. What I can tell you is this whole opening is completely original to this story. Mm-hmm. So we open, and it's the year 1462. We get a little narration from Anthony Hopkins telling us that Constantinople has fallen, and all the Christians, all of Christendom is under attack, and there's a warrior named Dracula who has risen to, like, fight back, basically. We see Dracula, Gary Oldman, looking really young. He's wearing this, like, red suit of armor.
Very young.
And he kisses his bride. His bride is Winona Ryder. Mm-hmm. And then he goes off to battle. It's narrated that, like, he kisses her thinking that he's never going to return from this fight, but he's got to do his duty and go out and fight.
He does also look a good deal older than her.
Yeah.
Like, younger for him, but in comparison, older.
We see him go out on the battlefield, and he kills tons of people. He slaughters everyone. He's just out there impaling people. We definitely see, like, basically he's impaling people. It never directly calls him Vlad the Impaler or Vlad anything in this, I don't believe. It's always just Dracula, but it's very heavily saying, like, this was Vlad the Impaler, especially with this sort of stuff. He's fighting the Turks at this point, and while he's out fighting, the Turks tell his kingdom that he has died on the battlefield, even though that's not the case. This word gets back to his wife, and she gets so sad about him being dead that she pulls a Romeo and Juliet and goes up on top of a tower, writes a note saying, like, I can't live without him, and then jumps off of the highest tower, ending her own life.
Yeah. Just completely throws herself right off of it.
And he comes back alive to find his wife just splatted on the pavement. Or cobblestone, or whatever they used back then. He's so upset about all of this that he renounces God in anger. He's just yelling about God sucks, basically, to a couple, like, monks or priests or whatever they're supposed to be, one of which, or the lead of which, is Anthony Hopkins, which, if you're not really paying attention, it's very easy to miss, but this is kind of layering that throughout history there's going to be these reincarnations of Winona Ryder coming back, who was his wife at this time, and then Anthony Hopkins coming back as Van Helsing, who is not really necessarily set up in this moment to be like his foil or I don't know, the guy who goes against him or whatever. But that's sort of where they end up. So he's a priest here, watches all of this happen, gets killed, and then in the future is gonna, like, have the reverse effect.
Who did the Van Helsing movies?
What do you mean Van Helsing movies?
Like, wasn't there Hugh Jackman?
There was a Van Helsing movie with Hugh Jackman, yes.
Nailed it. Just wanted to make sure my memory was working.
Okay. So once he renounces God, he says that he's gonna rise when he dies, which is a wild thing for anybody to just claim.
I think that'd be hilarious to say at any point if you die. Like, back then, right now, scare a bunch of people on your way out.
God sucks, and when I die, I'm coming back.
Coming right back for you.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
So go out.
In his anger, they're in, like, I guess it's a church or something. It's got a lot of, like, crosses and stuff, but it's got one big cross on this little like, table. He takes his sword and he stabs this stone cross. I don't know how well that would actually work in real life or whatever, but
Probably not well.
when he stabs it, he, like, chips the cross, and the cross starts to bleed, which is even stranger. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But what he decides is, fuck it, I'm just going to drink this blood. So he drinks the blood, and then we fast forward to London, 1897.
Yeah, that part really icked me out.
Yeah.
I don't even like the idea of drinking red wine. Just
Red wine?
because it's, like, thick and red, and it looks like blood. I don't like it.
I guess.
So when I saw that scene, I was
Well, you'd be a terrible vampire then.
I would.
Yeah.
Terrible.
So now we're in the future. We're like 430 years plus into the future. And we see a man in an insane asylum saying he did everything he was told, and then he starts eating some bugs. And this is Renfield.
Yep.
Now, Renfield is basically... they don't ever say it, and I don't know if in Bram Stoker's novel this is where the word comes from, or if it developed later on, or if it came from something entirely different and then got adapted into Dracula sort of lores. But Renfield is basically Dracula's familiar.
Right.
In that he has promised Renfield immortality to turn him into a vampire
One day.
as long as he serves Dracula and does what he tells him to do.
So basically, forcing him to be his personal assistant.
Mm-hmm.
So helping him like get people, helping him get rid of people,
Yeah.
all keeping the mirage of their lifestyle, all of that.
Yeah. So Renfield, we get a little backstory in the future, but what happened is he went to Transylvania, or wherever it was that Dracula's at. I think they do just call it Transylvania, maybe. But he goes there to meet with the Count, to help the Count get some property in London. And while he's there, shit goes crazy. We don't see it in this movie. And then he comes back to London and is just looked at as a crazy person and locked up in an insane asylum. He eats bugs. We find out through Dr. Seward, I should say, Seward, not Stewart, who's kind of keeping an eye on him, trying to figure out like what has caused his mania. He was perfectly sane before he left, and then he came back and he's crazy, and now he eats insects and stuff. And he learns that the reason he eats them is when he eats them, he gets their life force.
Right.
And Seward's like, okay, well, what if you eat like a rat? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, what about a cat? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, so if you eat anything, you absorb its life force. Cool. You're nuts.
Right.
Renfield does try to like attack him a little bit at one point, but he kind of fights him off easy enough. This hospital they're in is wild, and I don't know if this is like a gothic horror thing or if this is an actual like Victorian England thing that was happening. But some of the people who are seeing to the patients are wearing cages on their heads.
Oh yeah, what was with that?
The only other thing I can't think of off the top of my head if I've ever seen another movie or book or TV show or something where this has happened. But there is one other thing where I know that was something that happened.
Saw?
No.
Oh.
Saw?
Did someone in Saw have a cage on?
Yeah, but those are traps to kill people.
Oh, right.
No. In a video game called Bloodborne, which you would know nothing about,
Nope.
its setting and aesthetic is sort of Victorian era London kind of stuff. It's not specifically set in London, but it's like that time frame. That's what it looks like. In there is a character who you have to chase who wears a cage around his head.
Oh.
And he's supposed to be like a scholar, and there are other things that do it, but everybody like slowly loses their sanity and stuff. That's part of the whole point of the game is having like sanity or insight and whatnot. So the cage thing must have been like an actual thing to some degree. I don't know if they thought maybe just putting metal boxes on her head is going to keep the crazy out, but I don't know how anybody would ever think that would happen. Or it was just to protect their head from somebody trying to like bash them over the head with something.
Or what if they like were so manic that they were like clawing at their face or something, or like trying to gouge their own eyes out?
No, but they weren't the patients. They're the people caring for the patients who are wearing them.
Yep.
I don't know.
I guess
it's wild.
That is wild. I wouldn't like that at all.
I feel like some people would like, I want to do that job, and then they'd get there and they'd put the cage on and they'd go, turns out I'm claustrophobic.
Yeah, no, you're not paying me enough shillings for this.
So we soon meet Keanu Reeves, who plays Jonathan Harker. And Jonathan Harker is sent off to Transylvania to go see Count Dracula about all of the land that he's trying to buy up in London. We learn that Renfield was his, not necessarily teacher or anything, but he was the guy who went before him. But since they never finalized the deal, they need to send somebody else. So they're sending Jonathan Harker.
Was this is after she wanted to get married, right? Or before?
Before.
Gotcha.
So we now meet his fiancée, Mina.
Okay.
And Mina looks exactly like Dracula's dead wife.
Winona Ryder.
Winona Ryder. Or if you're a Johnny Depp fan, Wino forever.
Oh, that's right. He does call her that.
No, he had a tattoo of Winona Forever and then changed it and it said Wino.
Oh, I thought he still... Oh.
I mean, they might get along, but this
Yeah.
was like when they were dating, he got one that said Winona Forever. And then when they stopped, he altered it to say, like, Wino.
I feel like I saw something somewhere before that he referred to, or is that...
I don't know, maybe. It'd be kind of weird to keep that if, after the fact.
Would be.
So Jonathan and me are talking. Jonathan's like, all right, I gotta go do this business deal. Once I get back, after like a week or something, which seems unrealistic. I don't know how long it takes in a whatever kind of sailboat ship thing, whatever those are called.
It's not a sailboat.
I know it's not a sailboat. I don't know what it's called. A galleon? Is that one? That's one of those really big ones. A pirate ship?
Yeah.
What are they called? I don't know. I don't know how long that takes to cross the Pacific or Atlantic. Not Pacific, the Atlantic. But considering like the Mayflower and stuff had a lot of people dying on it, it's not a short trip.
I don't think it's a short trip. This isn't like a short little hop across the pond.
That also must have been, thinking about it now, back then, your life was quite literally like, all right, I gotta go travel across this ocean. I could die, so
Hope I
see ya.
live.
See ya.
Or don't see ya.
Which, I mean, I guess you could still think that way nowadays, but,
Actually, that was very true.
flights might take you like 16 hours or something and is reasonably much more safe than being like, all right, let's get on a old-timey boat and just use the wind to get across the ocean for like 3 weeks and hope none of us get scurvy and die.
Scurvy. Or hear sirens and decide to jump off the side of the ship.
Yeah, or see manatees out in the ocean and go, wow, look at that mermaid. She's thick.
She's thick. 3 C's. I'm jumping in there.
So Jonathan shows up in Transylvania, and we see that he's got a letter wrote to him by Count Dracula welcoming him to his home country. And while he's reading it, we do get this cool shot. We get a number of these shots, which is hard to tell if, like, is Dracula actually looking at him,
Mm-hmm.
or is this just, like, supposed to be representative of, like, your reading, so we're seeing, I don't know, it's left for interpretation, but I'm just going to say Dracula can turn himself into sky eyeballs,
Yes.
because while he's reading this in the carriage, outside the window of the carriage, we see in the sky, which is kind of red, like it's sunsetting and kind of red, we see Dracula's eyes in the clouds.
Yeah.
But basically he's just like, hey John, you sound like a cool dude. Let's hang out, bro. Welcome.
Let's have a sleepover.
Yeah.
Let's have some fun together. Also, by the way, you can actually, it's a hotel now, you can book a stay and stay there and have like a weekend experience there.
At Dracula's house?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Do the creatures of the night make sweet music?
I don't know.
Yeah, well. So the carriage at one point stops and lets Jonathan off. And Jonathan's like, yo, I think we're here too early. There's nobody else here.
Mm-hmm.
None of the townspeople or people he's riding with talk to him. They just hand him a crucifix and peace out.
Deuces.
Which is different from the 1930s version. Well, the 1930s version's already different, but this is one thing that like really stuck out to me as very different, is that in that one we actually see Renfield go to Transylvania, not Jonathan. But when he's there, he's like, he stops off in a small village, and the people of the village are like, don't go see Dracula, don't do it, it's dumb, don't do it, you don't want to do that. And he's like, okay. Not here. Here they just hand him across and go, all right, see ya, good luck.
Good luck. See y'all next year.
Shortly a new carriage arrives, and this, I don't feel like this is very clear, or at least not as clear as like the 1930s Dracula was, but the guy driving the carriage is Dracula, but he's in like a disguise. And in this one, You can't really tell. It seems like it's some sort of creature or beast because it's just like doing like a heavy breathing sort of thing, almost like a wolf or something. Mm-hmm. It also does a weird thing where instead of Jonathan just getting onto the carriage himself, the thing reaches out, like extends its arm seemingly further than it should be able to, and like picks him up and carries him into the carriage, which Jonathan does not at all seem bothered by. He's just like, Transylvania, weird place.
Stuff happens.
Weird
here.
Place.
I don't know. People seem to have incredibly great hand strength.
Also, it doesn't seem like we don't see Dracula pick up his luggage. Mm-hmm. So did they just leave his belongings and was like, whatever.
Bye.
While they're in the carriage, we do see some wolves running alongside the carriage. Mm-hmm. Jonathan tries to talk to the guy driving, but he gets no response. He looks over a cliff at one point like, whoa, we're really close to this cliff. But they arrive at the castle. They also go through like a blue... It's not really clear what exactly this is supposed to be, but they're blue flame-looking circle things which they go through. Maybe it's like a protection spell or something. It's not really clear what the fuck this is supposed to be.
Yeah, they don't really explain it.
But when they get there, Jonathan is greeted by an old man who's got the ugliest looking hairstyle ever.
Yes.
They look like a baboon's butt or something on top of his head.
Absolutely terrible.
This is Dracula.
Yeah.
Old man Dracula, 400 and something years later. For being eternal, he still ages, it seems. Just very, very, very slowly.
Right.
Jonathan also at this point, outside of Keanu Reeves' like strange, not great accent that he's trying to do. And I don't... Did Bill and Ted come out before this?
I'm assuming that it did. I think so. But he looks very, very young.
Yes, so of course Bill and Ted came out before this. Bill and Ted was 1989. This is 3 years later. And Keanu almost feels like he's doing the exact same, maybe not as dumb of a character, but it still feels kind of like Ted-ish.
I think the reason that it feels Ted-ish is because he's kind of got this mix of like innocent, naive, and just kind of like...
That actually might be what it is.
Yeah, like innocent, naive, like very, I assume the best in people kind of way about him, which Ted definitely has.
Which you also assume the best people, and that's going to get you turned into a vampire one day.
That is actually very true.
So yeah, Jonathan just, in this point, seems like an idiot. Because he's not questioning any of the weird stuff that's going on.
He kind of has golden retriever energy. So he's just kind of like, he's just like, he's here for a good time, and he's here to make friends.
He's here for a good time, not a long time.
Not a long time. He's here to make friends, and he's here to be like an upbeat guy.
So red flag number one for me, if I got past the carriage and everything without any questions, is when I finally show up, Dracula brings me to this big like table to feast, and there's only a single plate with like a full chicken just waiting there and red wine and stuff, and Dracula just goes, "I do not partake. I do not drink the wine." I'd be like, "Oh, okay." That's kind of weird. Did you eat before I showed up? You knew I was coming, but you ate still anyway?
Like, do you want to share maybe like a different drink, like a white, maybe some sparkling water?
Yeah. Dracula also at one point, red flag number 2, whips a sword out of nowhere and just randomly swings it at him and like yells at him, and Jonathan's just like, okay.
All right. That's eccentric. The quirky little behavior you have there.
He does point out that there is a painting on the wall, which we know is of Dracula when he was human, probably, or at least a lot younger. And Dracula's like, "Oh yes, the family Dracula goes way back in time. I am the last one or whatever. And it's like, okay, cool.
Yada yada yada.
I do like here, though, we do see that Dracula's, and I don't know, again, if this is, like, I can't think of any other vampire property where I've seen this before, and I'm not, like, ingrained in vampire culture or whatever, but his shadow does its own fucking thing. It just, like, he walks one way and the shadow kind of goes a different way. The shadow multiple times is shown, like, trying to strangle Jonathan or something.
It's very Peter Pan. It's very
it is,
like he's doing one thing and the shadow is doing
so it's like
another.
Peter Pan's shadow, but it's also, is it actually the shadow itself, or is this like Dracula's intentions, like his internalized intentions manifesting?
Maybe like his subconscious.
Yeah, it's like manifesting as his shadow, like he would want to strangle him because he knows Mina is his fiancée, so he wants to kill the guy so he can have Mina to himself.
I'd like to think that the shadow was different. That it had its own.
That it's its own thing. Yeah. Almost like in What We Do in the Shadow, Nadja's doll.
Nadja's
it is
doll.
Nadja, but it's its own thing.
She's got a little part of her soul trapped in a tiny little porcelain doll. And
Yeah.
she's her own person, but she's also her at the same time.
Yeah. Also, at one point, and even weirdly, we see Dracula has a photo of Mina, and then Jonathan's like, "Oh, you found my photo of Mina." It's like, did we know you lost a photo of Mina? Like, where did that come from?
Where do you think that would have come from?
This is where he tells him that I did have a wife once. She died. I think, does he cry here? Does he have a teardrop? He cries a few times throughout the movie.
Yeah, it might be.
They very much are making him a bit more empathetic in this, so that you can feel for Dracula and sort of his...
Understand him more.
Yeah, like his isolation and his rage and anger towards losing the love of his life, and then maybe making it understandable that he wants Mina because she seemingly is a reincarnation of, I think Elizabeth was his wife's name.
I don't remember. But it's definitely one of those like method to the madness sort of situations.
Now, this is worth probably noting, is that in the original story, there is not a reincarnation like subplot. Mina is not necessarily a reincarnation of his wife. She just happens to be an attractive woman that he's like, damn, I want that. Similar,
just like also a brunette.
Similar, Helsing is not like a weird reincarnation of like this priest guy. That's unique to this story. I do like it. I think maybe you could have done a little bit more with the priest to actually make it feel like maybe there is like a family vendetta sort of thing. Because that's not really set up, so him just later on being a doctor in Van Helsing instead of like a, the Pope or something, doesn't really correspond a lot, but having a reincarnation of his wife and having that be like his motivating factor for wanting to go to London and wanting to get her and get Jonathan out of the way and all that makes a lot of sense and gives it a little bit more agency than just like a random, like just because. I understand that the just because part is what might make Dracula and vampires, especially back in the day when it came out and the lore and stuff, being a bit more scary to just be like, yeah, they prey on young females, versus like, no, the dude just missed his wife.
Yeah, he had a reason for it.
He had a reason for it.
Give him a break.
From here, we cut back. Dracula basically talks Jonathan into staying longer, going, hey, look, I'm looking at like these 10 potential properties. I would like you to stay a little bit longer to help me finalize this stuff. But also, because I'm going to London, you could fill me in on like London culture and things I need to know. Instead of me just going and feeling like being out of place.
Yeah, what's new? What's hip? What's
he's
the
like,
deal?
He's like, look, I'm like 400 years old. I don't go out much. What's happening? What's popping?
What's popping? What's life like?
I hear there's these things called, like, Nickelodeons. What are those?
What are the kids doing?
What are
these
these
days?
moving pictures?
Those moving pictures.
Back in my day, you had to sit on a chair for 8 hours while a man painted you.
Absolutely perfect.
Why he was Italian, I don't know.
I don't know.
We then cut back to Mina, and we get to meet her best friend, Lucy. She's Mina's rich friend. It's very much pointed out that Lucy is rich, and they're talking about things. Oh no, this is the best part. Mina's like writing sort of a journal about missing Jonathan and stuff, and when Lucy comes in, she's also reading the book Arabian Nights,
Right.
which is what Aladdin is based on.
Right.
I don't know anything about the Arabian Nights story, but in this, and I'm curious if this is true, there are just... It's basically like pornographic, that there are full color spreads of sexy times happening. It's almost like it's a Kama Sutra or
Kama
something.
Sutra kind of
But
thing.
like, is that in Arabian Nights? Like,
have no
did Disney look at the Arabian Nights story and go, this is cool, but let's remove all the sex stuff?
Let's get rid of the Kama Sutra and then just focus on everything else.
And it's a fun little scene where Lucy, when she comes in, she's like, what are you doing? Oh, you still reading this dumb book? And she tries to cover it up like she's embarrassed.
Yeah.
And they knock it over, and Lucy opens it to a page of, like, people 69ing or
Yeah.
something. And is like, oh, you dirty lady.
Yeah, because she's very much so the innocent type, but you know, and into literature and all of that. And her friend is so sassy, and she's that friend that's just like loud and open and will embarrass you on purpose. So when she tries to embarrass her with the book, she does kind of get a little bit red in the face.
It is a fun scene. It's so funny, and again, it's one of those things like, if you were to shown me that scene and not have shown that it was Arabian Nights,
Like no
I would have been
context.
like, was she was studying the Kama Sutra? Is she like that hyped about her wedding night that she's like, all right, here's what we gotta try. Here's the checklist.
I'm studying.
Butterfly, upside down, reversed cowgirl, whatever. Like, is she just going through the motions? No, she was just reading like a classic story that just apparently multiple times in this people are getting it on, and whoever created it decided you have to see what's happening.
Yeah.
we
Have
can't
some pictures.
we're not going to describe it, we're just going to show you, which is how I like my books, to have pictures.
Oh.
Don't say okay. Read a lot of manga, that's what they are. They have
You
pictures.
do. But yeah, I love that idea of it. Just someone maybe thinking that
Aladdin
she's like
would have been way different.
studying what this is what to expect.
Yeah, Aladdin would have been way different if
Yes, it would have.
if Disney wasn't a kid-friendly studio, I guess.
That is true.
We then cut to a party. Lucy's having a party. Or they're just at a party and they're both there. I don't really remember what it is, but it kind of seems like Lucy's sort of running the show, because Lucy is like, gosh, I'm so jealous of you and Jonathan because you're getting married. I wish I could find a man. And Nina's like, you could have any man.
Yeah.
You're attractive and you're
Spunky
rich. So
and rich.
And we very quickly learn that, yeah, you could literally do that, because at the party, we get introduced to... Well, we get reintroduced to one character and introduced to two others. The first one, I believe we see, is Dr. Seward, who is the one who is studying Renfield. He comes to the party and he knows Lucy. And Lucy instantly is like, oh, doctor, ooh, kiss me. Oh, hey.
Very touchy-feely, very familiar.
And he's like, oh, wow, Lucy. And then 2 seconds later, Arthur walks in, and she's like, ooh, Arthur, kiss me. Wow.
Yeah,
I like you.
Her
Ooh.
attention gets taken away very quickly to a different guy.
And I might be getting wrong what order they come in, because the most important character in the entire movie enters at this point.
Right.
Big Tex himself, Quincy, the American from Texas, cowboy, great-ass mustache, comes in, and Lucy's like,
Yee-
hey, Big Tex.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw. Howdy, partner. And he's like, howdy, ma'am. He doesn't sound very cowboy-y, but
No.
I guess he doesn't also have too many speaking lines. But he's probably my favorite character in this, even though he's a very minimum character. His character is Texas.
It's just Texas.
He's Texas. But he's like a subtle Texas because he's not wearing a cowboy hat the first time we see him. He's not like yeehawing or anything.
No, but you can...
It's very thrown away line of like he's Texas, but it's also clear that Bram Stoker at the time probably has maybe heard of Texas and heard of like cowboys in America. So he just went, he's from Texas. I don't know.
I just remember thinking...
Texas is... Did the Alamo happen before 1897?
I remember thinking in that scene that just a neon sign above her head, if you know this like lyric from the song or this reference, just said, "Save a horse, ride a cowboy."
Okay, so yes.
Save a horse, ride a cowboy.
Wait, when was Bram Stoker born? This is gonna I'm gonna revolutionize the way people think about this movie and book right now.
It was so hilarious that there was a Texas character.
Okay, so Bram Stoker was born in 1847.
Okay.
The Battle of the Alamo happened in 1836.
Ah!
So he was born 11 years after. So there's a good chance that Bram Stoker growing up has heard about this mythical battle in America, in Texas.
Texas land.
Where these handful of Texans fought off the evil invading army of Mexico. And they were cowboys, and they're here. He quite literally grew up, like, maybe hearing news articles or reading news stuff of crazy shit happening in
America.
America. Actually, I don't even know where he's technically from. Where was he from? Was he from England?
I think that's really funny.
He was from Ireland, so he...
Yeah.
Again, there's a high possibility that... I don't know how news traveled or what all they talked about back then, but there's a good chance that during like the gold rush and expanding westward in the United States and things, that maybe some of that was newsworthy for over there, and he had read this stuff about cowboys and maybe seen a picture in the newspaper or some shit and was like, I want to write a story that has a cowboy in it.
Yeah.
And then
He's from
Quincy
Texas.
Quincy was created. I just revolutionized the whole story. Nobody knew that.
You learn something new every day.
Probably not even close. But my headcanon is now that as a little boy, he learned about the Battle of the Alamo. And one day he went, when I'm a writer, I'm going to put a cowboy in my story.
Yeah.
I don't know how...
With them bat guys.
I don't know how Irish people sound, but yeah.
It wasn't that.
It's not that.
Anyway.
So Lucy is loose. Because she gets around. She seemingly is promiscuous.
She's a good time Sally.
She's a good time Sally, yeah. We then cut back, or we see that Dracula somehow seems to hypnotize Mina at this party. He's sending vibes from across the pond to Mina at this party. Because, again, it makes a little bit more sense with the resurrection kind of storyline they're going for, or reincarnation, I should say, that him and his wife might have had this connection on a more spiritual level, I guess, that maybe he can send vibes. Or just Dracula, if he set his mind to it, could literally talk to anybody across the world.
I can't decide if I think it's that or that they were just emotionally and mentally on the same wavelength. But
I feel like what it's going for is that him and his wife were on a, they had that connection.
Yeah.
In theory, you're supposed to have that connection with your partner.
Right. In theory.
I'm trying to send you mind signals right now.
You want to get sushi.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. He doesn't like sushi.
We then get to see Renfield again. Renfield in this movie, look, my only direct comparison is two things: the 1930s Bela Lugosi Dracula, that Renfield, and Nicholas Holt's Renfield from Renfield.
All I've got is Nicholas Hoult.
I like the 1930s Renfield most of all. One, because his character in that movie, there's a moment where Renfield seems to get his sanity back, and sort of kind of helps the main cast before kind of going batshit again. Also, the actor who played him in that has a great, just like, insanity smile look on his face. There's some great shots from that where he just looks absolutely bonkers. This one, I don't mind so much, but he is just straight up basically crazy the whole time. And Seward's trying to study him a little bit more, and this is where Renfield lets out that his master promises to make him immortal, and Seward's like, your master? Who's your master? What master? And then Renfield tries to attack him, and the Cage boys come in to put a straitjacket on him at that point.
Is Guillermo not technically a Renfield?
In What We Do in the Shadows?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, again, I don't know where the term for familiars comes from. I don't know if it is a Bram Stoker Dracula, or if maybe that was like an earlier vampire, because Dracula is not the first story about vampires, but it is the one that had the most like worldwide cultural impact and
Right.
lasting appeal. So I don't know if any of the earlier vampire stories had familiars, or if like familiars were, you know, maybe something that was attached to witches that then just like somebody at one point kind of merged the two and it became a vampire thing. I don't know where any of that comes from, but in a sense, with What We Do in the Shadows show, Guillermo or any of the familiars on that are sort of a Renfield thing, because that's the idea, is that
Right.
the vampire is, I promise I will turn you into a thing. The only difference is in the shows, they're not sort of like hypnotized or
They're just
bit
kind of
or
luring them
sort of like
along.
turned in any sort of way. They're just mostly like, I promise one day I'll do this. And the
Yeah.
people out of their own free will or own accord are doing the bidding in hopes to get that. Whereas Renfield is basically being like manipulated and controlled, and his mind is like broken and stuff
That makes sense.
into the thing.
That
So
makes sense. Good explanation.
something along those lines. I don't know. We go back to Jonathan, and this is the scene I mentioned really early on, in that Jonathan's shaving his face with a straight razor, which I still to this day want to have a straight razor.
Oh my god. I made a very specific note at this scene. I said, old-timey shaving scares me. Like, who just rubs a blade on their throat in their Adam's apple?
I want a straight razor. I've wanted
Oh.
a straight, and this is gonna sound even crazier, but ever since I first watched the Sweeney Todd play, the musical, I've wanted a straight razor. Not to like slice people's throats or my own throat. I just think first off, I like the way that they look.
They look
I like that they're
cool.
kind of like switchblades with the little like, they got the little like tail that comes off
Yeah.
of them. I like the way that they look.
They do look cool.
But also, I just think, like, outside of using just a Bowie knife or something to shave your face, that's got to be like the manliest way to shave your face that there is.
If I had
Just with a straight up blade right against the skin.
Ugh. If I had government secrets, all you would have to do was put me in a barber shop, and maybe like a millisecond into watching an old man get an old-timey shave up his throat, I would tell you anything you wanted to know. Ugh.
So, Jonathan's shaving, and he cuts himself shaving, and out of nowhere, Dracula just appears and is like, "Oh, my boy, you must be careful." Oh, and as Jonathan looks away, he licks up that blood real quick.
Ugh.
Lovely. We also see this is the first time we see that he has no reflection,
Right.
and the mirror that Jonathan was using shatters. Jonathan doesn't ask any sort of questions about it. It's just like, oh, well, that was weird. The mirror just broke on its own. And Dracula warns him kind of at this point. Well, Jonathan kind of sticks up for himself a little bit here. He does kind of snap back at Dracula at one point. But again, it doesn't feel like enough. Like, dude, I get it. It's 1897 or whatever. Movies are just coming out and you haven't seen a horror movie yet, but come on. This is, as you would put it, things are kind of fucky. Get out of there.
Yeah, things are a little fucky. It's a little bizarre. It's a little weird. It's kind of like the equivalent of like when a kitten like hisses and spits at you. Like they're trying to be really tough, but they're still, just small and little.
So Dracula basically warns him like, hey man, it'd be real cool if you don't go to the old part of the castle. And he comes up with like, I don't go there since my wife died, bad memories, just don't wander over there. And Keanu's like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I won't go there.
And as he's doing that, he sees the cross on his neck, and Dracula's like, oh, crosses, that's a bad sign for my family.
Don't like that.
We also hear some wolves and stuff outside howling, and Jonathan's like, God, they're so annoying. Is it always like this? And this is where we get the classic line of Dracula going, the children of the night, what sweet music they make.
I would love to listen to wolves on
I'm
that.
just giving horrible impressions. I don't know what that one was. I almost felt like I was doing like a Godfather thing. I'm making enough
You do keep leaning into Italian a little bit.
I don't know why. What do Romanian people sound like? Blah, blah, manto suck your blood, blah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just
that. Like that. Jonathan doesn't seem to like the music. He doesn't like the wolves howling or anything. I think you'd like it too much. You'd want to go see these wolves.
Oh, 1,000,000%. You don't think I wouldn't come home one night with a wolf puppy?
No, because you'd be dead before you could pick it up.
Nah. They know I have good intentions.
So Jonathan, like the good idiot he is, does not listen to Dracula and decides, I'm going to go explore this castle. And while he's exploring the castle at night, he finds this room with just a treasure chest in it for some reason. And he opens it and there's a bunch of just random gold treasure all over the place. And he's like, wow, this is weird. And then he opens up this bottle of something. It almost seems like a perfume or maybe like a wine or something. And the liquid inside drips upwards. Mm-hmm. And he just kind of watches it do that. And he's like, oh, that's weird. And puts it back.
Oh, how funny.
We then hear somebody calling for him. They're like, Jonathan, come here, Jonathan.
Like sirens.
Yeah. And he gets lured into this bedroom. He sits down on this bed. And as he's sitting on this bed, up from between his legs comes this topless woman.
Yeah, she naked.
And then another one. The reverse of what happened to Johnny Depp in The Nightmare on Elm Street happens. She appears out of the bed.
Out of the bed.
And then another one comes up on his other side out of nowhere. He's now just in bed with two women on his sides, one woman between his legs, all of them basically naked. And somehow one of them melts the cross that he's wearing.
Yes.
Not sure how she did that, but she just melts the cross that he's wearing. And then they all start getting rubbing on him and getting him,
hot and bothered.
I've got a fiance, but I've never been with 3 at once before. And then they start to bite him.
Yes.
And start to drink some of his blood. And then Dracula shows up and scares him away. He's like, I want to say there's some movie where something similar happens. People are attacking somebody and then someone comes up and is like, get out of here, and scares them away.
I don't know. I can't think of it. It reminded me of going outside and shooing away a bunch of raccoons at a garbage can.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Get out of here.
As Dracula doesn't like shoo them away as much as they sort of grovel at his feet, and Jonathan's just sort of watching this. Dracula turns around and then turns back, and he has a baby in his hands.
Yes.
And he gives the baby to the women to eat.
He did do that.
Which, again, Jonathan doesn't say or really react at all to this happening. We then get him narrating like a letter that he's writing. He's talking about he's seen a lot of these gypsies that Dracula has loading earth into boxes, so just shoveling dirt into these boxes that he's having shipped over to London. And he does find... I don't think this is very clear, but I think it's supposed to be indicating that he finds Dracula inside of one of these boxes, or it's just showing us that Dracula is going into one of these boxes, because there's a moment where Dracula, in a like mostly golden looking nightgown, pops up in front of you. It's like a jump scare sort of thing. I don't think it's very clear if it's Jonathan finding him in the box, or if it's just telling us that Dracula's shipping himself through these boxes.
What do we know about gypsies?
They steal your underwear.
They steal your clothes and your water heaters. I know.
So we cut back to London. We find out Lucy's getting married. Yep. She has decided on one of the three. Personally, she made the wrong choice. But she has picked, she's going to marry Arthur. Probably the safest bet. Carrie Elwes. Why not? We see Dracula's eyes again while all of this is happening, because a storm starts raining down on them. We see his eyes in the sky again. Then we get the good part. And this is where it ties back to the movie we're seeing this week, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Because we get a captain's log from the Demeter. We don't get to see what happens on the Demeter.
Right.
And from my understanding of the book, from what people have told me, this is a very small portion of the book. The ship is transporting all of Dracula's stuff to London.
Right.
And during the travels, Dracula gets out of his box because he gets the munchies, and he eats and kills the people on the ship. In this movie, in the book, in the 1930s movie, it's very brief what happens. We hear that captain's log, stardate 19 whatever. Not actually stardate, that's Star Trek. That was a joke. You didn't laugh, so I had to explain it.
Star Trek jokes go over my head.
So we see the ship in like rough seas, and then we get to see on one of the sails like blood splatter. We don't see much more. The 1930s movie gives us a little bit more. We see that when the ship gets into port, there's a dead man tied to the helm to like steer the ship, and when the ship reaches port, we see a dog or a wolf jump off of the ship and run away.
That's very disappointing to me, because the very first time we saw a promo for this movie, I was like, I have no idea what this is about, but it said that it was, based from a book. I was like, ooh, maybe I can sneak and get the book and read all about it before the movie comes out. And then to find out that it's not covered a lot was a bummer.
Well, not to spoil this new movie, but of course they could always change it. They can tweak things, whatever, because again, the portion of this movie, or even the original book that the Demeter takes part in, there's very little actual information other than the captain being like, hey, we're shipping these things from this place to this place, and then we're 6 days into the thing, things are getting weird, the crew thinks there's something on the ship, holy shit, there's something on the ship, and then we know through like a newspaper that the ship arrived and people were dead. So we don't know what happens other than like Dracula kills the people on the ship.
Right.
With the new movie, they could go any number of ways with this. Like some of these people maybe everybody does die, maybe someone or some of the people actually escape the ship in some way. Who the fuck knows? We will find out soon enough.
We will find out. As long as all the people die, I'm okay, and the dog lives, I'm okay.
Yeah. Once we're here, we get like this POV shot, which I assume is supposed to be Dracula in like his wolf form, kind of roaming the streets to try and find Mina. Instead, he calls out to Lucy, and Lucy, in the middle of the night, in this like red nightgowny thing,
Negligee.
is walking through this yard, almost like a maze sort of thing with like fountains and stuff, rich people shit. And Mina chases after her, and when Mina finds Lucy, she's being assaulted by Wolfman Dracula. I think he's supposed to be like a wolf, but he definitely looks like a
Dude.
very hairy man.
Yeah.
He's definitely like a wolf hybrid
It's
sort of
almost
thing.
like he was trying to become a wolf, and then he got stopped. He got stopped like midway.
So Dracula is like just viciously attacking Mina or Lucy. When he sees Mina, he just goes, "You don't see me," and then like bright shines things and disappears. It's hard to tell if Mina forgets that she saw him, or just doesn't really care and cares more about Lucy. But she runs up to Lucy to make sure that she's okay. She is still alive, so that's good. We then get to see that Dracula is now younger.
Mm-hmm.
He looks basically like normal Gary Oldman, but he's got a mustache and a little soul patch thing going on and long flowing locks. And he's dressed up in his best gentleman clothing with a little top hat and a cane.
I don't like.
Does he have glasses? I think he's got like sunglasses on. He does, because he like lowers them to look at it. He does that thing of like looking through his eyebrows.
Eyebrows.
Yeah.
Sexy.
Yeah. So we find out here that he can move around during the day, but it does weaken him. So he's not like at his full power, but he can move around during the day. We see that Dracula's kind of stalking Mina during the daytime. He's kind of watching her in the streets. And then he gets bold enough to introduce himself to her. Mm-hmm. And he's like, young lady, I'm new to town. My name's Vlad. How you doing? And she goes, I don't give a shit. Bye.
Yeah.
She probably the greatest thing she does in this movie is just like, cool. I don't care. See ya.
No thanks. Hard pass. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying.
We then go back and we see that the doctor shows up at Lucy's house per her fiance Arthur's request because he's worried about her. She confides into him that she's been hearing and seeing things. And he's kind of like, oh, okay, well, we need to start doing some tests, figure out what's happening. She kisses him. Very naughty, because you have a fiance. But this is also still Lucy being Lucy as we know her, being very frisky.
Frisky, inquisitive. I don't know. Just very eccentric.
The fiance, Arthur, kind of comes back and is told by Seward that he's not sure what's happening, but he's going to call somebody who he trusts would know more than him, which is his old teacher, or his mentor, Dr. Van Helsing.
Dun, dun, dun.
Bum, bum, bum. We cut back to Dracula. He starts to get a little bit handsy with Mina, who basically they kind of made up in the street. He asked her where a local theater is so he can see these moving pictures people are talking about.
Oh, yeah, the pictures.
And it's funny in the background, the picture that they're showing, and I forgot to look this up because I don't know the exact year that this was happening, but I'm almost confident that they're watching the train pull into the station, which is one of the first big film things that were shown to audiences. It might not be the exact one, but it's definitely a train coming towards the camera. Basically what happened is, I forget who did it. I want to say it was Brothers or something, but they set a camera up on the platform of a train station and filmed the train coming into the station. And when they premiered this or showed it for theater goers, because they'd never seen something like this before, the only moving pictures you would have seen at this time was mostly people like sitting in chairs or dancing or like silly sort of stuff to just like show movement. This was a train coming straight at you, and people thought there was actually a train coming right at them.
That is so funny.
And caused some like little bit of like hysteria of like, oh shit, we're about to get hit by a train, fuck.
So basically like the same sort of audience that when the radio station was playing War of the Worlds
bought into it, yeah.
And they all thought it was actually real. That's funny.
They're not really watching this. It's kind of playing in the background while they're talking. That's why I'm saying I can't 100% tell what it is. It also looks like it's in a negative, like because the train looks white and everything else kind of looks black, which would sort of be kind of the opposite of how the actual film should have looked. So again, I don't really know what they're actually playing in the background. That's just what it reminds me of, is the train coming into the station.
That's funny.
Dracula kind of starts touching Mina a little bit, and he's like, and she looks at him and is like, do I know you, mister? Do I know you? And he can't bring himself to bite her. He's like ready to do it, but he can't do it. And then Mina tries to run away from him. And as she's going, there's like a wolf. We've heard that there's a wolf on the loose from the zoo.
Right.
And the wolf just happened to have shown up here. And Mina's like, oh, shit. And then Dracula's like, come here, my child. And makes friends with the wolf. And Mina is instantly smitten. She's like, wow. Jonathan would have never done something like that. I love animals. Come on, that would work on you.
That would
If some person, if there was like a bear rampaging in a street and then somebody came up and was like, easy there, Winnie the Pooh. And all of a sudden it was friendly and you were like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually, that would work on me.
Wow, yeah. So it does seem like she's kind of trusting him a little bit more. He does take her home and he does the whole thing of like kissing her hand. Just trying to, this is way before X, formerly known as Twitter, so you can't exactly slide into the DMs.
No.
You got to do it on a personal level.
Yeah, you got to do it on a personal level.
We then get our first sight of Van Helsing. We're a good, like, maybe hour into this movie at this point. Maybe a little bit less than an hour, but we're getting close to the halfway point, at least. And Helsing is giving a lecture about vampire bats. So he's talking about, like, they need to drink more blood than their body weight to survive, blah, blah, blah. Kind of foreshadowing that he definitely has expertise in, like, animal biting, blood loss sort of stuff. It's kind of hinting at his knowledge that will be useful. He gets a letter, and he reads the letter and goes, sorry, gentlemen, this is urgent. Peace out.
Gotta go.
I'm going to London.
Also, bats are so cute. I am
Sure.
100% on bat TikTok. I follow a couple different accounts of like bat rescues.
Bat rescues.
I just watch. I like to watch bats. They're so cute.
I freaking love bats.
I freaking love bats.
We cut back and we get to see John again for the first time. So he was left in Transylvania, chained up to a bed where the vampire women just, as he puts it, slowly drain his life from him, but not so much that they kill him. Enough to just keep him alive, but also to quench their thirst. Basically like an eternal torment sort of thing.
Right.
He does say that he thinks the only way out of here is basically jumping into a river, and that he's going to try and escape that night. Dracula visits Lucy again that night, and calls to her more. Enticing her. Some of our men hear Lucy being crazy and like moaning and shit, and they run in to find her just wiggling all over the bed and
I would describe it as writhing around.
writhing. Yeah, that's a good word.
She's just kind of writhing around like a possessed person.
Yeah, and we do see that she has bite marks on her neck. And Van Helsing, who sees this, says, okay, well, we got to do a blood transfusion, so Arthur, get in here, do a blood transfusion. She's your fiance. Hook that shit up. No care for blood types or anything. Just shove that shit in. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Oh, well.
This is back in the day when they thought if you had ghosts in your blood, you should take cocaine.
Yeah, the ghosts in your blood. There's comments after this that they put 2 people's blood into her, which was, I believe, Quincy and Arthur's blood is what they used. And Helsing confronts the 3 men about what's happening to her. And he agrees that something might have bit her and flew away. They're just like, what could have done that? There was no blood on the sheets or anything. He's like, you're right. Something might have drank her blood and left. Who knows? And they're like, oh, okay, come on, Helsing, you're crazy. And then he does a little, like, magician act on them. For whatever reason, they're sitting on, like, a little bench. And Van Helsing just appears behind this, like, tall grass. And he's like, you're right, boys, something bit her and escaped. And they're like, you're a crazy old man. And when they look away and look back, he's gone. And they're like, Helsing, where'd you go? And then he reappears like 20 feet away behind a tomb or something, and is like smoking. Like, I'm over here, boys. See how easy it is to just escape when you're not looking. And it's like, are you telling them that a magician did this to him? Like, what was the point of that?
Yeah, silly.
Like, you didn't turn into a bat or mist or whatever. They just turned around and you like,
just ran real fast and crouched down.
It's just a weird way to try and get your point across, is all I'm saying.
It's very fun to think about.
We get to see Lucy again, and she looks absolutely awful now. She's definitely bedridden. Mina
emaciated a little bit.
Yeah, Mina shares that Harker's safe. He has basically escaped his prison. He jumped into this river. The river flowed him downstream. He got out of the river, just happened to be at a convent where all the nuns were like, oh, a man, bring him in. And then he was like, write my wife a letter in London. Hopefully in all these months she's not moved or anything. And so she's like, Lucy, you'll never guess. Jonathan is fine. He's at a convent. He wants me to go see him. We're going to get married in another country. And Lucy's just like, okay. Cool. I'm dying, but thanks.
Yeah, sure. It's only been, however long.
Yeah. Also at this point, Van Helsing or somebody brings in, like, a necklace of garlic, and Lucy's like, get that shit away from me. Fucking garlic. She then tries to lure, I think it might be Arthur. She's trying to bring him in. And she goes to try and bite him, and Van Helsing and everybody stops it from happening, and they kind of hold her down. Things are getting a bit crazy now.
Yeah.
While they're holding her down, they notice her fangs are starting to come in, and Helsing realizes that, and he goes, Nosferatu!
Dun dun dun!
Bam, bam, bam! Yeah. We then cut to him opening a book titled Vampire. Vampire. He opens it up, and this is an additive from just sort of the lure and stuff about people being like, Vlad the Impaler's, who's this based off of? Because the book straight up just shows us Vlad the Impaler, like a sketch of Vlad the Impaler, to be like, oh yeah, Dracula, oh, that guy, it was him, yeah. So it's a story about Dracula. Dracula in London is waiting for a hot date with Mina. However, she writes him a letter to say, sorry, dude, turns out my husband's alive, and I'm going to see him, and we're going to get married, so while I appreciated our time at the movies and that you let me pet a wolf...
Thanks, but no thanks.
I gotta go. Yep. See ya.
Bye.
She puts him on red. Is that what it's called?
Oh, yeah.
Leave him on red?
She left him on red.
Yeah.
She ghosted him.
he cries, but his tears are like purple. or like I don't understand that. Is it supposed to be like blood or whatever? It's weird. There was an instance at one point too earlier where Mina cries and he grabs her tears and turned them into like diamonds or crystals or something. Never brought up again. I don't know if that's like just something Dracula can do. Like, is that how he's rich? He just makes little kids cry and turns that shit to diamonds and sells it?
Yes.
Ooga booga. Ah! Thanks, kid. Thanks, kid. I'm out of here.
It's like a little slot machine.
I did say at this point Dracula ugly cries because this is the scene where he's like half vampiric and he's just super ugly, just bawling his eyes out. This is the definition. Anytime somebody's like, ugly cry, it should be an image of this. Because he's half in his like bat face looking self,
it was
just
very
crying.
Off-putting. Very off-putting.
Helsing is like so excited about finding out that this is Dracula that he's after. He's like, fuck yeah, I've been looking forward to this my entire life. Let's do it. Which is so funny that he's that excited about it. He then sets up to have Lucy be watched over because he thinks Dracula is going to come back for Lucy. So he says, look, Arthur, you stay in the room with Lucy. Have a pistol, guard her, whatever. Arthur's like, cool, I can do that. I'll have a pistol, I'll have a whiskey, I'll protect her. Doesn't work out. He falls asleep after having like half a cup of whiskey.
That's what happens.
He's a lightweight. Our hero, Quincy, is told to stand guard like a good Texas boy. He's got his rifle, and he's got a cowboy hat on, and he's got like not quite a duster, but he's got a nice jacket on, and he's kind of walking the premises, looking around, trying to scope things out. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it's all kind of for naught, because Dracula still calls for Lucy, and just kind of, he does kill a random guy. He just kills some random dude, and they weren't able to stop him, basically. We cut and we see that Mina has made it to John. They do get married in this little church thing by the sisters. And Dracula, when he finally gets to Lucy, he curses her with the need for living blood. He's like, look, if I can't have Mina, I'm going to ruin everybody else's fucking day. You're going to be immortal. You're going to need blood to survive. You're now cursed with what I got.
Petty.
Very petty.
Petty.
He then attacks her as a wolf after doing that, which I guess maybe just like finalizes the thing. Like he fully kills her so that she can rise again as a vampire, I think is the point. We cut to the next day. Lucy is in a casket. She's just full on dead. They've got her in a little see-through casket, which is kind of weird to me. And she's in this like completely white, like wedding dress kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Also seems kind of weird to me. All the men around her are sad, obviously, because they're like, God, I missed out on my chance.
So close.
The funny part is Helsing doesn't seem to give a shit about it, because as they leave, Helsing's like, all right, boys, look, we're going to have to cut her head off and take out her heart. And they're just like, bro, she just died.
They said, do what in the
Once we're back in London, John and Mina have arrived back, and then while they're in a carriage, John just happens to look out a window, and who does he see? But a young Dracula, and he goes, there he is, but he looks young. Whoa.
Wow.
That was my Keanu Reeves impression.
It was good. It was okay. It was alright.
They're terrible. I'm not good at impressions. So Van Helsing takes all the boys down to Lucy's casket that night, telling them that she's undead now. And they're like, I don't know if I believe you. Mm-hmm. This is Seward, Quincy, and Arthur that he's taken with him. So this is like the little posse now. I love this. I love that it's like, here's one thing that I like about this. That maybe modern adaptations or things kind of like tweak or change or kind of remove completely to some degree, is it's not like when you think Dracula and Van Helsing, you're thinking Dracula, Van Helsing, kind of one-on-one, mano-a-mano. The Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman, kind of that situation. Like, Van Helsing, the vampire hunter. Like, he's going out killing these people on his own. Dracula's his ultimate nemesis, that kind of thing. But it's not. It's like, it's quite literally a posse of guys who Van Helsing has, like, coerced into, like, look, you guys brought me into this. Yeah. Now I'm bringing you into this. We gotta kill this dude.
It's like a ragtag group.
Yeah, which I like. And they're all, while they're not exactly the most fleshed out or deep characters, they're at least unique and different enough. Although, to be honest, Seward's kind of a Van Helsing light. He's a doctor. His, whatever. Arthur's just like a nobody. He was the fiancé. Quincy's the hero. He's the Texas boy.
For sure.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So they get down there, and he's like, look, open up the casket. We'll see if she's there. Maybe I'm wrong. They open the casket. No Lucy. She's gone. As they're looking at it, they start hearing some sounds and stuff coming from the entrance to the crypt, and they all hide off into the corner. And coming down the stairs in her, like, bridal dress, burial gown, whatever, is Lucy, but she's holding an infant. She's gone out on the town and stolen somebody's baby.
Yep. She just got a baby.
And this is probably one of my, like, the funniest parts of the movie is she's going to her casket, like she's going to get back in the casket and have a midnight snack on this baby. And Van Helsing jumps out and they're like, Lucy! And she just turns around and just drops the baby on the ground.
Yes! I made a note of that.
She just straight up drops the baby.
She just drops that thing like it's a fucking hot potato.
Yeah. She then tries to seduce Arthur. She's like, oh, my sweet, my love, Arthur. And Van Helsing uses a cross. This is the first time we're seeing a cross used to, like, repel the vampires. He uses it to back her back into her coffin. She vomits blood onto him, which is a great sort of visual.
That was gross.
And then Arthur stakes her in the heart. And Van Helsing cuts off her head.
Yeah.
And seemingly she's dead. She's dead at that point. We cut to a dinner where Harker's there, and Harker tells Helsing where Dracula lives, at Carfax Abbey. He's like, look, I helped him get that place, so I know where he's at, so we could go and get him. He's at Carfax Abbey. And Van Helsing's like, fuck yeah, boys, we ride.
We ride at dawn.
We ride. And this time, both Jonathan and Mina are in tow with him. Coincidentally enough, I suppose, or maybe this was on purpose, we don't really know if Dracula is like, is anything located close to the insane asylum? Because I love to hear, like, crazy people screaming at night. So if I could find something close, that'd be great. Because Carfax Abbey, or wherever they go, happens to be right next door to where Renfield's being held. Because we see Renfield watching everybody go towards that place, and he's yelling, Master, they're coming, Master. He's trying to warn him. And we see at this point, Van Helsing goes, all right, Quincy, Arthur, John, you're with me. We're going in there. We're destroying Dracula's stuff. We're burning all of his boxes and whatnot. Seward, you take Mina somewhere safe. So Seward goes, all right, Mina, let's go to the insane asylum. I'm going to put you in my office. You'll be safe here. Nobody will get to you. Don't mind the crazies. It's fine.
Hell no.
Mina does speak with Renfield here because Renfield's saying some shit. He's just like, my master has come for you, blah, 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 whatever, who cares? We go back to the boys. They're destroying all the boxes with the soil in them. They're burning them. I don't understand this part, and perhaps I just don't know this, but, like, does soil burn?
I don't...
Like, when there's a forest fire, like, ground
like
is still there, but I guess maybe some of the top layer burns?
Yeah, if it's, like, super dry, I would assume that the top layer would burn, but not if it's...
But don't you also use that to, like, smother fires, too? Like, if you have a fire pit, you might, like, shovel some dirt or ground onto it, And I wonder if maybe that could be like a moisture level or something to the soil. I don't know.
I'm so used to living in Texas where nothing means nothing, so I have no idea.
I don't know either, but that is their thing. Is like, we're going to break these boxes open and we're going to burn it. When we look up onto the ceiling, Dracula is in full, like, man-bat mode, just resting up there. He sees it. He decides, I ain't going to fight 4 people. I'm going to just turn into mist, green mist.
Yeah.
And he flies his way into Renfield's cell and basically just kills Renfield. He's like, Renfield, you asshole, you betrayed me. And, like, kills him. And, like, what did Renfield do? You left him locked in prison. You could have probably broke him out, and then he could have been helpful.
Very unfortunate. Like, also, he didn't want that smoke.
Yeah. Dracula also at this point goes to see Mina, and as he's trying to, like, seduce her or get her to love him, she actually does buy into it and is like, hey, I love you. So while they're finishing up burning his boxes, Mina is buying into everything that Dracula's kind of selling to her.
Right.
And she does say she loves him, and he does bite her at this point.
Right.
And then it goes to, like, drink his blood, and he turns her down for a moment because he's like, wait, maybe I don't actually want to turn you into a vampire. But she says, take me away from all this death. Just seems to be enough for him to be like, okay. All right.
Yeah.
But at that moment, all the boys run in and fight off the full vampire version of Dracula, and he gets backed into a corner, and Van Helsing's like, the light, get him with the light. But it's too late. He fades into the shadows, and by time somebody, whichever one of it is, puts, like, the candlelight up to him, he turns into a bunch of rats and escapes.
Yes. Yeah. Just a crap ton of rats.
Which you said you'd be okay with. And I can't imagine anybody in the world would be okay with seeing, like, a vampire-y dude back into a corner, and then when somebody puts lights on him, all of a sudden it's like 100 rats.
But rats are so cute.
Yeah, but if 100 just appeared where a person used to be?
I'd like them better than the person.
Okay. All right.
They're so cute and fuzzy.
We hear that Mina and Dracula now have this weird, strong mental connection. Van Helsing kind of determines maybe that's the case. And they decide, okay, well, we can't just let Dracula go. We have to do something, and especially to save Mina, we probably have to kill him, and it might sever the connection, and all that'll be good. So they decide to chase after him, and they all hop aboard a train to try and beat him back to his castle, to try and, like, cut him off. But they realize during this that Mina is also, like, dying on their way on the train. Like, she's slowly dying, sort of similar to what happened to Lucy.
Yeah, she's, like, kind of fading away.
And they also realize at this point that Dracula is reading her mind, so he knows where they're going because he altered the path he was taking to try and get there faster. And they realize that he can tell where they're going. So they devise a plan to kind of trick him. They're going to split up. Van Helsing is going to more or less stay the course with Mina so that Dracula thinks that they're still going the same way.
Right.
But the boys, the rest of them, the other 4, are going to get on horseback and try and cut off the gypsy caravan that is carrying Dracula and kill him before he can get back to his castle. Seems like a logical plan. Actually, quite smart to do.
It is pretty smart. It's good that they were kind of thinking a little bit 2 steps ahead.
Yeah.
In a way.
So Mina and Helsing head straight towards the castle. And while they're going, they kind of set up a camp one night. And they must be getting relatively close to the castle because that night the female vampires come back. And they also control Mina in some way to where she tries to, like, seduce Helsing and to try and, like, kill him. And he sort of realizes this and kind of fights her off. He puts a like a holy wafer on her forehead, which kind of burns a little circular half moon shape into her forehead.
Did you know that you can order those on Amazon?
Religious wafers?
Yeah. Like, you can just, like, in bulk, just buy them and just eat them as crackers.
Do they taste like anything?
I have no idea.
Oh, I don't know either. I assume that they probably don't. But also,
I don't think so. They
the
don't
only
look like they
people
do.
the only people probably doing that are Catholic churches.
Yeah. I'm assuming.
So he stops her, and she kind of snaps out of it, and then I don't know how exactly he does this, but because it's like snowing, but he puts a circle of fire around them to be like, stay out of here, witches, or evil vampire witches, whatever you are.
Vampiric demons.
So like the fire is going to keep them away, and he's like shouting at them to kind of go away. But instead, the women are just like, fine, if we can't get to you, we're just going to kill your horse. So they go and they attack the horse. You just kind of see the shadows, and Helsing's like, fuck, that's, what the fuck?
Yeah, that was really mean.
The greatest part of all of this is, I guess them eating and killing the horse gave them a food coma, because they must have just dozed off or stopped caring enough that Van Helsing, early in the morning, sneaks off. Mina's asleep. He sneaks off, and he decapitates all 3 of the vampire women and throws their heads over a ravine.
I think they just kind of went into, like, the equivalent of, like, a girls' night out, and then they ended it with, like, a shit ton of Taco Bell, and they just slept through everything.
Slept through getting their heads cut off.
Yep.
Van Helsing now has killed, if we consider cutting off the head the final straw, he's killed 4 vampires, all of which were women. So, take that as whatever you want that to maybe mean.
I knew she was
Mina kind of wakes up at this point, and is sorry, I'm kind of lost in my notes here. After he cuts off their heads while they're all asleep, we cut back to the boys, the posse, and they've caught up to the gypsies, and they start shooting and kind of killing the gypsies one at a time. Not like the coolest action scene or anything. It's kind of a little bit of a mess, but they don't completely stop the little caravan. They do sort of eventually, but it's not probably as clean or smoothly as quickly as they were hoping. They needed more Texans. They only had one.
They only had the one.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Mina, while Dracula's caravan's being attacked, he kind of hypnotizes Mina, and she wakes up and she just starts speaking in tongues and casts like a spell, which brings up that weird blue circular fire gate thing again.
Yes.
Again, don't really know what the fuck that's even supposed to be, so it kind of feels pointless. It just happens. We also see that it seems to make the sun go down faster. It's not clear if it's like the sun is going down faster or if it's making clouds move in front of the sun. One or the other is what is happening. It's not exactly clear, but basically Dracula's trying to get rid of the sun so he can be at full power, instead of what they're hoping is the sun's still out so he's weaker.
Right.
Once they've kind of stopped the carriage, there's a little bit more of a fight. Unfortunately, our boy Quincy gets stabbed in the back during the struggle, but he does manage to kill the person who stabbed him in the back, so he's still alive, but wounded. Dracula pops out of the box he's in and is ready to attack, and he gets his throat slit. I'm not 100% sure who slits his throat. It's either Jonathan or Seward. I do not think that it's Arthur, and it's definitely not Quincy.
I have no idea who it was.
One of them goes up in the box, and again, I'm just not... I'd have to rewatch it. I'm just not 100% sure. It's one of those two. But Dracula comes out and he's like, all right, let's fight. And he instantly gets his throat slashed.
Yeah.
And while he's like, oh, fuck, Quincy, the hero we deserve, comes in and stabs him in the heart.
Yeah.
And Dracula being wounded, Mina comes up, still kind of like in her love hypnotism part, and runs away with Dracula. And Jonathan stops anybody from pursuing them, and they turn back, and our beloved hero, Quincy, has died from his wound of being stabbed in the back. But he did what he needed. He mortally wounded Dracula.
Yeah. He did what he was setting out to do, I'd say, more or less.
We then get to see Mina and Dracula are at the cathedral or little church hall thing, which is where Dracula turned into Dracula all those years ago. We see the same cross. It's still got the little crack from where he originally stabbed it. Mina kisses him while he's dying, and Dracula reverts back to his human-looking form.
Right.
Basically, it's kind of weird, but Mina at this point says that their love is stronger than death, and some light sort of like shines on his face. I think this is sort of maybe his soul coming back to like rest or something, like coming to peace or something, almost like crossing over, like you'd say with like a ghost or something. He's reverting back to the last time he was human, basically, as the cross itself heals, sort of indicating that maybe he's been redeemed, sort of, or I guess in this case, like, he's dying, so it's like balance is being restored, or however you might want to look at that. But while she's doing that, his hypnosis or control of her over her has also sort of broke, and she pushes the sword in more to deal the final blow itself. So unfortunately, she has technically stolen the kill from our hero, Quincy, but I'm still going to chalk that one for, we'll give Quincy half a point for the kill.
I think he gets at least some sort of point for that.
Dracula dies, releasing her from his spell as he dies. She kisses him one last time while he's like dead. So I mean, I guess whatever. And then she pulls the blade out of him from his body and cuts off his head.
Yeah.
Just to absolutely make sure.
Just to double check.
And that is the end of the film.
And that's it.
This movie runs a little over 2 hours, and I actually really enjoyed it quite a bit. It is kind of cheesy, and there's definitely things in there that are very sort of hokey and stuff, like the eyeballs in the sky a few times are kind of hokey and whatever. There are a few shots that feel weird, almost like things are kind of superimposed, but it's just like it's a weird, like, forced perspective kind of angle that they're doing that's kind of weird. And then some of the side characters like Seward, Arthur, and Quincy are pretty one-note, kind of flat characters. And Keanu Reeves' accent is wild in this movie.
He did his best.
But overall, I really enjoy this movie. I think I would put it on... Again, I've only really seen the two movies, but I put it on equal standing with the Bela Lugosi one, I think. I enjoyed both of those movies. I think both are, while they are quite similar to each other, also have enough differences between them that you could watch both of them and still enjoy the movies.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of fun with this one.
I think it was really good, and we watched it, and I think we started to watch it at one point kind of late in the evening, and I fell asleep towards the end, and then I decided to rewatch it again.
Yeah.
And I think I got better perspective on my second watch with it. But yeah, there are some parts that are very hokey, but there are other parts that also feel so nostalgic and perfect.
Yeah.
And I took down this note. I don't remember at what point. It had to have been towards the end of the movie that someone was ordering a drink of absinthe.
Yeah, they drink absinthe.
They drink absinthe.
Oh,
and
there's...
someone said...
I know why.
Someone in the movie... Like, I know... I've heard of absinthe. But in the movie, they said that it... the way that they referred to it, it translated to the absence of being human.
So, I think... Now, again, and I've said this 100 times... Having not read the book, I don't know if absinthe plays any part in that story. But what I do know is they mention in that scene as well that I think the absinthe logo is a green fairy.
Yes.
And the green fairy is a mythical creature to do with like Irish folklore or something. So because Bram Stoker is from Ireland growing up, would have known about like green fairies and things like that. So either that's in the book and it's purposely in the book because he grew up and would know like this green fairy sort of thing and could like, you know, put it in there as like a little nod to his where he's from, or that's something specifically for this movie that's just sort of a nod to his heritage. Kind of thing. So I don't really know. It is kind of a strange thing that it almost feels product placement-y, but it's either it is a product placement, which would be kind of crazy to be like, absinthe, like, put money towards this? That's crazy. It would have been weirder if they were like, ooh, Coca-Cola. Yeah. Or it is something that's in the book that's, again, probably just like a nod to his home country or the green fairy
I'd like to think that it's a nod, too.
So I don't know the answer to that, but it's
a fun fact.
Tied back to him some way.
Fun fact.
So yeah, I really enjoyed that movie. That was the first time we'd ever seen it, so it's fun. It does have me in the mood. I'm very much ready to see the Demeter because again, I think for a part that is so minuscule to the Dracula story, I think it's a fun, smart way to flesh out Dracula without just retelling Dracula.
Yeah, same thing.
You're fleshing out a part of the story that there's not much to go off of, so you can have a lot of fun with it. Yeah. We know where it's going to start. We know likely how it is going to end or is supposed to end, but we don't know what actually happens. So it's going to be just fun to see like
a different perspective.
A more like very centrally horror, because while Dracula is horror of like vampires are scary and people die and whatever, this is feels almost more like it's gonna be a slasher movie on a boat where Dracula eats the shit out of people.
Right. I'm very excited for this. I love the fact that I didn't know anything about the Demeter up until this. I am glad that we got to watch that little refresher and got to get, you know, updated on certain things and investigate certain things. I love the new things that I learned, and yeah, I am so stoked for this. The dog better live.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Wherever you're listening at, please leave us a rating, a comment, all that stuff. It definitely helps grow all of our stuff. Share it around if you'd be so kind. That always helps as well. You can find us all over the place at Chicken on a Stick Podcast or COAS_podcast. We post things on Instagram, Facebook throughout the week. And then on Fridays, we usually do a stream where we review a movie that we had seen recently in the theaters. So you can check us out on Twitch. Again, just search Chicken on a Stick Podcast. You'll find us there.
Yeah, and if you have any thoughts or ideas or things that you've heard about Dracula that you want to share, put those in any sort of comment section. Or if you also have any ideas for upcoming movies that we should watch, also put those down there.
Yeah, so thanks again for listening, whatever you're doing.
Thanks for looking.
We'll see everybody next time with another episode, which will be a Maggie pick.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll see you then.
It'll be a great one. Bye.
Bye.